Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. We got a legend here. Randy Savage's guy. You know doggone well it's not Randy Savage. Good gravy, man. It's Liam Savage from Toronto, Canada. He's our frequent guest here on the Outdated Wrestling Hour. You know, he's here all the time. What do I care? You got this guy Puccio, and what's his name again?
I'm Joe Puccio.
Yeah, fella, I know all about it. All I know is I haven't had my soup yet. I'm late for my millinery class. Goodbye, guys. As he would say, bah, it's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Well, hi-ho, everybody. Once again, it's Bob Smith, formerly with Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and this is the Outdated Wrestling Hour with Joe Puccio. Joe and I will be back in just a second. We're going to do our usual commercial announcement. Joe and I are going to kibitz for a while, and then we bring in our guest, Mr. Liam Savage, and we're going to talk about, well, back and forth, heels and faces. What are they today? We'll look back at some great turns of the past, since John Cena seems to be in everybody's mind still. Give us a minute. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Unless you're going to the fridge. If you're going to the fridge, grab me a PBR ice cold, please. In the can. No, that's fine. In the can. Go ahead. Well, I reckon it's time to do a little bit of an update for the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Let's see what shows you can enjoy several times every week. They've got a veritable cornucopia of wrestling podcasts, so let's dig into it. Pretty much the flagship of WrestleCopia is the Wrestling Memory Grenade. Join host Ray Russell as he analyzes and discusses years of wrestling history from your favorite promotions. From Hulkamania to Mulkymania, from the Midnight Express to the Lex Express, they've got it all. Tune in and get a big piece of history on the Wrestling Memory Grenade. If you like nostalgia, this one's for you. The Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop. What a legend Bob Roop is, and he welcomes you to the Wrestling Stoop as he shares stories, historical moments, and all kinds of memories from his 20-plus year career as a wrestler and booker. And you know he got wild near the end of his career. Find out all of it on the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop. One of the most unique wrestling podcasts anywhere is DG's Puro Wrestling Academy. Join host Dan as he travels back in time to discuss the history of pro wrestling in Japan. He's spent decades studying the world of Japanese pro wrestling. Now he offers up his historian-level knowledge to you. You'll learn something on every single show, I guarantee it. That's DG's Puro Wrestling Academy. The great Gene Jackson hosts the Retro Wrestling Review. That's RE-View. Brings in a variety of co-hosts and wrestling legends to the program as he goes back in time to watch and review pro wrestling from years goes by. Get the breakdown here at Never Before Heard Stories, and feel free to watch along with them. It's worth it, let me tell you, especially if you're a USWA fan. Enjoy the Retro Wrestling Review. When this show started not all that long ago, it was called Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert. Now it's Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich, two of the great stars from Memphis and beyond. You'll learn all about them, hear great old school stories, stuff you've never heard before, definitely on Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich. One of my personal favorite podcasts out there is Wrestling Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty, a meat and potatoes named for a anything but a meat and potatoes show. Join him as he reminisces about pro wrestling history with a variety of legendary guests and topics. And what I like about him, he knows everything about Dick the Bruiser, Bruiser Bedlam, and the WWA. But that's only part of what you'll hear on Wrestling Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty. It was the WWF versus WCW, Raw versus Nitro, the Monday Night War, the Ratings War, the NWO, the Attitude Era. Now, there's a podcast all about it. It's called Monday Warfare, Raw versus Nitro. They break it down with episode reviews, you name it. If you want to know all about that classic ratings war, listen to Monday Warfare, Raw versus Nitro. One of the most unique podcasts you'll hear anywhere is the Other Ship podcast. It's a pop culture contest with a pro wrestling lean. Join a rotating group of co-hosts as they talk movies, sports, music, TV, food, and of course, pro wrestling. They take on various topics in roundtable discussions, special guest interviews, and other content concepts. As they say, laugh your ass off on this voyage aboard the Other Ship. New episodes are in the bag for the Captain's Corner pod. Join Captain Nick as he presents the Captain's Corner podcast. It features old school wrestling interviews and discussions, plus all the latest goings on in the world of the Captain's adventures. Nothing else quite like the Captain's Corner pod. Also on the WrestleCopia network, the Glory Days GrappleCon cast. Hosts Barry and Captain Nick present the Glory Days GrappleCon podcast featuring memories and special interviews with wrestling stars of the past and even those of today. There's even more at WrestleCopia, a podcast called TR Shocks the World, the WCNN News, and the Power Hour. It's quite a lineup with more new podcasts joining all the time. It's the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. How do you get involved? It's pretty easy. Go to their constantly updated website, WrestleCopia.com. Click a few buttons and take a voyage into wrestling's past, present, and future. Get it all at WrestleCopia. Well, thank you, Bob. 20 minutes from now, our soon-to-be unemployed staff announcer, he got a letter, he got an email. Did you know that, Joe? Bob, 20 minutes from now, got an email. He said, tell us what you did the past week or we're going to fire you.
I didn't know that, no.
Why should he be any different than anybody else, the old fart, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, hi, everybody. This is Bob Smith with the inimitable Joe Puccio, and this is the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Joe, good to see you again, my friend.
Good to see you, Bob. Hello, everybody.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I like that. Hi-ho, everybody.
Hey-ho.
Back from Steve Allen days, right? Yeah. Showing that we're old, folks. We're remembering Steve Allen, who hasn't been on TV since 1982 or something like that. But, that's the Outdated Wrestling Hour for you. You never know what old stuff you're going to hear. And we're going to take a little look back before our special guest. As I've always said, this podcast is about looking back with fondness and gratitude at the stuff that we really liked. And this is going to be one of those shows. But before that, Joe and I are going to kibitz because that's what we do best. I was just thinking recently. Now, The Rock came on WWE television and he's cursing up a blue streak, which means at home it's censored. You don't hear anything. The sound cuts out. Or the fans are cursing back at him, so you hear intermittent sound mixed with long silences. Is this entertaining? And wrestling has a long history of censoring, so we're going to take a look back at the history of censorship on your TV. Joe, you remember some of these moments, don't you?
Certainly do. Growing up watching wrestling, it was something to see. I mean, you knew that something was pretty serious going down. If you saw that big red X on your TV screen, you saw somebody laying into somebody, whether it was with fists or with a foreign object. As soon as you saw that big red censored X come out, you knew things were getting real, so to speak.
Yeah, well, so to speak, yeah. But it really is true. I always considered the censored mark because, a lot of people did it. Even big time wrestling censored a match once when Bulldog Don Kent busted open Mark Lewin, and I guess he bled so hard that wherever he went, there was this odd typewriter style X over his face, and they wouldn't show him up close. But that was rare because the lead guy there was the Sheik, who was nothing but blood. So I don't understand why they did it on that particular match. But I think psychologically, as a promotion, I can't help but think that a lot of the reason a lot of organizations would do this in wrestling was because they wanted you to come to the arena and see the whole thing uncensored. It was almost like a psychological ploy. Like, as a little kid watching it, like 12, 13 years old, At home, I'm thinking, oh, this is scary. I want to see this. Only wrestling can do that to you, right? I was scared a little bit. I said, geez, this is unnerving, but I wish they wouldn't censor it. I want to go to Albany and see this happen for real. So only wrestling can repulse you and turn you on at the same time. It's the oddest thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah,
you want
that's a good
more, but
point.
you don't want more. It's the oddest thing. Only wrestling can do that as an entertainment form.
And that's a good point. I admittedly I never thought about that, growing up watching this, that I guess that was a motive of the promoters, right? I mean, if you're a fan and you're watching this and you're watching a big brawl after a match and you see things are really getting violent and you basically can't see what's happening on your television set. I mean, that's as good of a reason as any, right? Of buying a ticket and going to see this live. Maybe I could actually see what's going on right in front of me where they can't censor it.
But you know what's really true? I recently when this show was new, I had Bill Apter on a couple of times. The second time he came on, I asked him point blank. The name of that show was Questions Only Bill Apter Can Answer, because he was
Right.
basically the only person around in those days. And we're talking 1972 when Fred Blassie returned to the WWF. And in the very first few matches, he was just biting his opponents into bloody shards. It was revolting. And the first time you saw the whole thing happen, and as my memory serves, he bit up a guy named Big Jim Lancaster until it was just unrecognizable. The second week, they put the big censored mark on, right? Back then, it was just an X. Later, they added the word censored to it. But I asked him, why did they do it? Was it because it was a psychological thing to make people come and buy tickets to see all that violence and all that gore? Or were the affiliates upset out in syndication land where the show was shown? Guess what? It was a little of both. So he basically said it was a little of both. A lot of it was the affiliates getting upset at all the violence on the show. All right, Joe, you heard what he had to say. What's your reaction to that?
It's interesting. I mean, the affiliates, the affiliates having an issue with it. Do you think it was sort of, it went back and forth as far as that goes? I mean, the affiliates would have a problem, but it seems like there were plenty of times where they didn't have a problem. So, I mean, I'm not sure if it was consistent as far as that goes. Was it certain affiliates, or did it depends on the time slot or what era we're talking about here? I mean, it's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question, particularly for that era, because back then, if you were upset on something you saw on your TV station, you would call the TV station. You would
Right.
call your local station and go, my kids are scared to death watching this wrestling. I did hear an angry phone call to a talk show on an AM station called WGY near Schenectady up there, which is near Albany. And this lady called, that wrestling is awful, she said. All it is violence. I can't stand it. I don't know why they show this. They should take it off the air. The host said, you're right. It's terrible. So, they didn't take it off the air, but you could see there was pushback by the more squeamish or prudish or generally didn't like wrestling fans among us who just thought it was too violent. And hey, listen, I grew up in the bloody covers era, and I used to work at a chain drugstore in my hometown when I was a teenager, and we had a big magazine rack, and there was there was a cover of one of the London magazines of of Dusty Rhodes biting King Curtis right in the face, and a woman saw it and said, "Oh, I'm standing looking at the magazine rack," and she says, "You work here?" I said, she goes, "Take that away. I don't want to look at that. That's horrible. That's disgusting." So I did, "Yes, ma'am." And I put it so she couldn't see it. No, that's just awful. They shouldn't allow that. So, it was a different era, and I think maybe there was a lot of truth to the fact that the affiliates would get phone calls when things got too really strangely bloody, I think. I
Yeah.
mean, let's face it, wrestling kind of reveled in blood, especially in the 70s. It was on every magazine cover. It was throughout every magazine. Some of the London magazines were just, I saw, I think it was called Wrestling's Greatest Battles. Every page was soaked in black and white blood. It was just, every article in the thing was just blood, 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 blood. And the psychology of it, I don't know. I guess they really did think that red turned to green back then, all its promoters, particularly, Dick the Bruiser always bled. The Sheik always bled. Chief J. Strongbow loved to bleed. Freddie Blassie made other people bleed. And it was known for their violent predilections. And then Abdullah the Butcher took it to a whole nother level. Sheik too. I don't know. I think they knew that there was an appetite for violence, but there was pushback.
Yeah, for sure. And the magazines brings up memories for me as well. Just I can remember going to the newsstand and, back then there was a huge wrestling magazine section. I mean, it's not like now where you go to a newsstand and you'll see 2 magazines, maybe, if that, covering wrestling. Back then you saw 10, 12 magazines on the stand.
Every time.
Every time. And I would just flip through them. And yeah, it's like, especially the lower, especially the ones that weren't as popular. I remember I'd pick up some of those and you look at them and just some of the photos, pretty graphic. I think it would also, like you said, I think it's just a product of that era. It was completely different. It's not like it is now. Now it's, now we kind of just brush it aside.
But I continue to insist that part of the reason that the censoring of video wrestling in the old days took place was because it made you want to come to it was a psychological tactic on the part of the promoters. I can't, if I can't see all this violence on TV, I better get my butt out to the arena and pay my $8 to get a ringside seat. I really think in many cases it was intentional. They wanted to have a censored moment on TV to create an excitement about a match or a feud or get Ron Bass over, right? Because Ron Bass was not over and in WWE. And when he cut up Brutus Beefcake with his spur, suddenly everybody knew who Ron Bass was. You see what I'm saying? I think they use it as a promotional tactic to make somebody look mean or evil or nasty, and they want to see him get beat. You got to go buy your ticket and watch it in the arena.
Yeah, you make a good point. It's funny when you mentioned the whole censoring aspect of television wrestling. One of the first things I thought about was that Ron Bass Brutus Beefcake angle. I think it was, I want to say 1988. And the only reason why I remember that year is because, and I'm pretty sure this is correct, but I think that angle where Bass destroyed Beefcake with the spur, I think that's what led to Beefcake not doing the SummerSlam that year. That was the year of SummerSlam in the Garden. And I think that was when the Warrior, the Ultimate Warrior, came out in that surprise appearance and he beat the Honky Tonk Man. I'm pretty sure Beefcake was supposed to be in that match. So I guess that was a long-term sort of, booking that WWF did at the time.
I'll tell you what, too. I was at that SummerSlam. That was the very first SummerSlam, by the way.
Yeah, the first one, 88, yep.
And I got backstage afterwards. I won't tell you how, but I did. I was with Apter, that's why. And we shook hands with a few of the wrestlers in the parking area. And one of them was Briefcase, and he looked all gigged up.
Okay.
He really did. I mean, he had a Band-Aid, and he had these horizontal lines. They were like vertical lines on his head underneath the bandage. So he was walking around. He looked like he got legit cut.
Wow.
And sometimes wrestlers would stoop to that, to get an angle over, they would agree to something like that happening. Now, I could just be a mark here and was falling for a fake look, but right. He looked gigged up to me. I'm usually a pretty good judge of these things. So, but don't even remember the culmination of that feud, to be honest with you. I just remember that moment. I don't know what happened in the feud after that point. I just don't. I don't know what happened.
I agree. I was just going to say that. I do not remember if Beefcake ever got his revenge on Bass.
Yeah.
I would think he would have, but I that part as well, it escapes me. I don't remember. I don't think he did because I think, I don't even know now that I think about it. I'm not even sure how much longer Bass was around in the WWF. Yeah. He might not have been around too much longer.
You figure there would be a payoff somewhere down the line, but who knows?
Would think so.
But anyway, let's take a look back. I have a list here of some things I saw with my very own eyes, folks. In the 70s in the WWF, the spoiler, Don Jardine, the guy who first walked on the ropes, right? Well, he had a claw too, and he would get the big red X. And then I think that was followed by Blassie biting people in the ribbons. Oh, man. He was a scary guy, I'm telling you. Everybody remembers, Blassie the manager. That wasn't Blassie. Blassie the wrestler. And there's just not enough tape. It's not a shame. It's just not enough film, not enough tape of him in his prime. He was a master of crowd manipulation, gave the most rancid interviews, made you hate him. Some scribe in a newspaper described him as, quote, the worst villain since Hitler, end quote. That's how rough he was. Also, Baron von Raschke got censored for using a claw. They love to censor the claw holds because, guys squeezing blood out of people's heads. Blackjack Mulligan got the censored mark too. And in later years, of course, everybody remembers Jake the Snake Roberts and the snake bite incident with Randy Savage, which was the weirdest, sickest, but best pulled off stunt of that era. I thought it just looked horrible. Really, they showed children crying in the front row and people squeamishly, averting their eyes. And I didn't like it because I think it went too far. But by the same token, I think they pulled it off well. If it looked real because it was. I mean, it
Yep.
was genuinely scary. What do you recall from that incident?
I remember that angle so well, and it's one of the angles that stuck with me more than any other when I was a kid watching wrestling. To the point where, if you remember when Rich Mancuso had that old WFAN radio show back in
He's
the
a
early.
world class.
He's in Japan,
Yes, thank
but
you. That's my memories of the Rich Mancuso
exactly.
WFAN. He's a
But
world class, or he's in Japan. That was
or
the
he's in
Rich.
Japan, yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. I'm
It
sorry.
was one or the other, yeah. But I mean, of course, it's a different topic, but we didn't have much to go on in those days. There weren't
Mhm.
many outlets to listen to wrestling talk and things like that. Not like today. But anyway, I remember at the time that I was so shocked by that I remember I called in to that station, to the fan, to ask him about that. Ask him if that was, if that was legit, if that was real. How did they pull this off? Because it looked so good. And I mean, then you find out, as I got older and, you find out the behind the scenes that it actually was legit, that he
Yeah.
really did, but he did allow the snake to bite him.
Well, first of all, let me just tell the listeners that the station is WFAN in New York City, which is probably still the number one rated sports station in
Yeah.
the whole country. And they used to have an overnight wrestling block with Jody
Jody McDonald.
Jody McDonald and Rich Mancuso, and they would spend an hour talking about wrestling in the middle of Jody's show. So just to clarify all that. But yeah, I mean, but here's the funny thing: when snakes bite people, it's usually a bite, chunk, and that's it. This snake
But he
was
just
chewing
kept
on his
gnawing
arm
on
for
him.
2 minutes, right?
I know. I know.
I
It
didn't even
was.
know I didn't even know snakes did that.
No, I've read stories on or interviews with Roberts. Obviously, he's been asked about that so many times throughout the years, and there's so much back and forth on that. But uh, I guess you might have heard the stories that Savage was kind of nervous, which you would think he would be about going through with that angle. And I think Savage wanted proof that the snake was
Devenom
devenomized.
Yeah, devenomized, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he had the snake bite Roberts backstage before the show just to prove to him. I guess I guess he was a little paranoid, but I mean, again, you would think. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. So I might have been the same way. But yeah, I mean, that was just a really fascinating angle, and it's something that I had never seen before. Something to that, it was really like you said, if it was just one bite, it would have been one thing. If he just kind of bit him and then he pulled the snake off, but
Mhm.
his mouth was just completely wide, just right on the bicep, whatever it was, the arm of
Right,
Savage.
right. I
So,
think it was his forearm, yeah, and it was
oh,
just
yeah,
nasty. If you've never seen it, it's all over the interwebs, folks.
yeah,
Um, but that was more recently. I mean, if you go back to the 70s and 80s, there was all kinds of censoring going on in wrestling. I recalled seeing, of all things, in big time wrestling, Mark Lewin get a big X over his face for bleeding too much in a federation where all they did was bleed in every match. But for some reason on television, they censored the face of Mark Lewin after he was busted open by Bulldog Don Kent.
okay,
Underrated heel, but he was really good. Um, and then I remember seeing Roddy Piper had Abdullah the Butcher for a minute or two in Georgia, and he had him attack Wow McDaniel in the ring. And they did this weird thing where everything kind of looked shadowy. I can't describe it because I'm not a TV guy, but it's almost like the colors reversed, so you couldn't really see what was going on. You could hear David Crocker going, "Was he trying to do to Wahoo?" or something like that. And it was like he just kind of gouged a foreign object in his head about 40 times, and he got all bloodied up, and they carted him out of the ring. But the thing was, you couldn't really see it because they wouldn't let you see it.
yeah, right,
It's almost like it was just yellow outlines that you saw. I don't know if that's called chroma key or whatever it is that they did to it, but And I saw a similar match in the World Wrestling Council with Dory Funk Jr. and Abby after Abby, blooded him up. But, so this was going on in a lot of different wrestling organizations, the optical censoring of wrestling matches. And I'm sure there's a lot more than that. Dusty Rhodes got fired as a booker because he let the Road Warriors spike him in the eye on this 605 show. There was a no-no with TBS, and it caused a big row, and he lost his booking job thanks to that. And again, when they originally showed it, they showed the spike going in the eye, but they blurred it on subsequent viewings of that incident. So I don't know what to say, but that all brings us to today. And instead of, it seems like they'll show you anything, but here comes The Rock. And here comes other chants that the WWE fans do, and the AEW fans too. They'll chant "Holy, holy," but they're being censored. You can't tell what the other word is, right? And other things. It's like, and The Rock, I don't know why The Rock curses at the crowd because it's only going to get bleeped. And it does. You hear silence. You can tell the censor is trying to keep up with him and he can't. And sometimes something sneaks out, Why curse if you know you can't curse? Does that make any sense?
No. So I guess this is that time of the show where we complain about something, right? Because I have lots of complaints about that. I feel like it's gotten so bad with The Rock, especially since he's made his latest return, simply because to me it seems like he can come back and do whatever he wants, which is obvious. I mean, he's The Rock. If The Rock wants to be on TV, obviously they're going to let him come out there and they'll give him as much promo time as he wants, which is understandable. But why he goes out there and he curses or he says something to, I guess, pop the live crowd, it just doesn't make sense to me because the majority of viewers can't hear it. And it's not like the TV censors are only bleeping that one word. I mean, they're trying their best, but they'll just like bleep it out of order. They'll bleep the wrong word. They'll just completely shut off the audio for sometimes a minute or two straight. So you really can't hear anything that's going on. It makes for a really disjointed television experience. And I just don't get it because it's again, I get it that you want to do it for the live crowd, but I mean, why? You really should be appealing to the television audience. That's your bread and butter, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, because they're the ones that come out and buy tickets for the next one. It's just the way it goes. As I look back at all this, though, at all the censoring and all this kind of thing, I just want to say this. For me, optical censoring can work. I think it's an interesting promotional tactic. It creates curiosity in the minds of the uninitiated. It makes regular fans going, boy, I wish I could see all that blood. Wrestling fans are blood, right. Philadelphia, hi, how you doing?
Right.
Oh gosh, I was at an early Tri-State card, and Owen Hart was in the crowd, and he's having a scientific match against a Japanese wrestler. And I'm sitting at ringside. I'm sitting right down the road, in where the ring was, and there's a guy behind me screaming, "Blood!" He kept screaming blood throughout the entire card, and I'm like, "Wow, Philly certainly is a different wrestling town, isn't it?"
Yeah, right.
No, those fans love their blood. I'm telling you.
Oh my God.
And they knew Goodhart was the promoter who was going to give it to him, But I will say that, my gosh, that is, I think, a wrestling magazine honed fan. I think that's a censored honed fan who left his house and got a really good seat right behind where I was sitting to scream blood in my ear, blood all night long, no matter who was in the ring.
Yeah.
And it led to a mindset where some promoters wanted to give them that blood, like Joe Goodhart at one of the I don't want to call it ECW, it was Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. He had a card with a last blood battle royal. The only person not to bleed won the match.
Oh wow!
All the other 29 guys bled.
That was the legit match.
That was the match.
Oh wow! No, I never heard of that before.
A last blood battle royal.
I'm surprised Heyman never did that.
I didn't hear the blood guy scream that night, but I'm sure he was very happy.
Right.
So the way you won the match is you didn't bleed. You were the only one to survive by not bleeding.
Well, it's unique. I'll give him that.
Yes. I thought it was novel.
Yeah.
I kind of like the concept. Again, I'm not against blood. I'm not against violence. I'm against the type of violence where your suspension of disbelief doesn't believe what your eyes are seeing, like the horrible period in WWE when it was the pandemic, when they lit Bray Wyatt and he burned to death in the ring, supposedly, that kind of thing. Or you had Seth Rollins taking out Rey Mysterio's eyeball. I mean, that stuff was just
That was rough.
bad. That was bad. That was Vince. That's a desperate Vince McMahon trying to keep his business going, is what that was. And it was
About that. Where were they going to go with that had the Benoit thing never happened? I mean, was he just going to reappear? Was he going to be reincarnated? I mean, what the hell were they going to do with him? I mean, I don't know what the end game of that was.
they didn't know.
Yeah.
They
Well,
didn't know where that was going. And you know what? There was a lot of periods, even in WWE, where they started angles and they didn't know where they were going to go. They didn't. I mean, the AWA, if you go back to the days in the 80s when ESPN, they couldn't start anything because they didn't know who was going to show up from week to week. And I'm not being facetious. That's the truth. You know,
yeah.
for a while, AWA was operating with nobody under contract. It's like whoever showed up was on the ESPN show that week. So it's like I'm talking the very end of the promotion.
Right.
So I've always been a big WWF fan till today, and I will even admit when they're bad, they really sting. I mean, the gobbledygooker on down. I mean, Matilda the Bulldog, two of the greatest athletes in the ring, Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid, and they have a pet bulldog because they're the British Bulldogs. Jake the Snake Roberts was Jake the Snake Roberts before he entered the WWE, but he never had an actual snake.
Right.
Then he Then he enters the WWE, and then all of a sudden he's got a snake. Like
Well,
everything was broad. Everything was so broad, you know.
well,
And
you're
the
talking
years,
about the zoo. I mean, the WWF was an actual legitimate zoo. I mean, with Matilda, with Damien, with don't forget about Frankie, Huckleberry Ware's bird.
Frankie the Bird, yeah.
And I know I'm forgetting one as well, but
All right, all right. Listen, I'm getting nauseous, and so get yourself an extra large popcorn with butter. We will be back in a minute or two. One of my favorite things about doing this 3.25-year-old podcast is that I am presenting voices from around the spectrum of professional wrestling who were not previously heard a lot before you found my show. People like Joe Puccio, people like Tyler Peters, people like we just had Jamie Ward on the show. I love the fact that I can bring people on the show the same way that I did back when I was writing the introducing features in the Wrestler magazine. Once you get to know him, you like him. And here's one that, according to our ratings, you like a lot. His name is Liam Savage from Toronto, Canada. Hello, sir.
Hello, Bob. I'm just so thankful right now. I'm going to sound like my beloved Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I'm so thankful that my Canadian side can come together with an American side like yourself and just coexist. You know, it is possible, people. It is entirely possible. We just have to believe, you know?
We've always coexisted.
I know.
It's just lately some people are, shall we say, rabble rousing. I'll say it.
Yes.
So no, there's will never be a acrimony with Canada. Please. You've done too many fine things.
Yeah. We get along.
You brought us the Guess Who. You brought us Round of Bacon. You brought us SCTV. You brought us
Brian Adams, you know?
Brian Adams, yeah. BTO. Who else? Canadian.
Celine Dion.
Murray.
Not so
Ed
much.
Murray, yeah. Who'd you say?
Celine Dion, not so much. But
Oh,
I'm not a
yeah.
big
Not
fan,
so
yeah.
much. In fact, get off my show. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, good to have you back. We will
Thanks.
talk about wrestling here. You know something? I'm going to start with a very, very, very silly question because it just popped into my mind. Lee and I were recording before I hit the red record button. Here's the question. Who are worse gang up cheaters, the Four Horsemen or the Bloodline?
Ooh.
Now, as you know, I cannot stand outside interference all the time. And outside interference happens all the time.
Yep.
But I think the originators of the regular occurrence of outside interference had to have been the Four Horsemen.
Well,
They perfected it. They did it in such a sneaky way. If it wasn't Arn Anderson, it was Barry Windham. If it wasn't him, it would be somebody else. Tully was cunning and sneaky, and Ric Flair needed the help. How many times did the other three horsemen bail out Flair?
Yeah.
which is basically the same thing with the bloodline. The other family members bailing out either Roman Reigns or Solo Sikoa. So you know what? It's really the same thing, just modernized.
Right. I think there's maybe two ways to look at it. With the Horsemen, it was more, they wouldn't just kind of attack you for no reason. There was a reason behind it, but they would get very vicious with it. They broke Dusty's leg. You can't forget that. But the Bloodline, it seems like they're doing the same thing, but sometimes it just seems a little kind of haphazard to me. Maybe that's just, my old school mentality. It does a little sometimes forced. The Horsemen look like if they hated you, they're really going to beat the crap out of you. But if the Bloodline hate you, it's just they'll find any excuse in the book, like, oh, he just gave me a side look. Okay, well, let's beat his ass. That kind of deal. So,
But aren't they similar when you really think about it? It would be a high point in a match, and here comes somebody, to put salt in the frosting, so to speak. It was, it just ruins the whole thing, and everybody boos, and that's their job, is to get booed.
Yeah.
But I still think that WWE has a big over dependence on outside interference. You have these women wrestler factions like Nia Jackson, her little pixie, poison pixie,
Candice LaRue. Yeah,
Candice LeRae. Candice LeRae.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? There's always, and the same thing with Raquel Rodriguez and Liv Morgan. If one is around, the other one's going to be around, and somebody will interfere on their behalf.
Yeah.
And, the other women's factions did it for a couple of years too, with the Japanese women. So let's face it, WWE, they might as well call the E should stand for interference. Call it WWI, because that's what they do. In 1 out of every 2 matches, you will find at least someone come out who is not involved in the fight.
Yeah, and it's not even, for me, it's interference is terrible, but it's never as bad as disqualifications for me. That just, I don't know. That just...
What do you mean? You just don't like to see a match end in a DQ?
Yeah, never. I never want to see it. In a very, very rare circumstance, it can be used to elevate a story, and maybe it's needed. But otherwise, I can't get on board with it. I just can't.
Could you imagine, my friend, young Bob is in an arena in the 70s, and I'm watching a villain do some very bad things, and the referee's saying, break the hold! And the guy's not breaking the hold, and he's got a guy up against the ropes, and he won't stop hitting him, and the ref calls for the bell, and the place erupts in cheers and delight.
Yep. No,
it was a different time back then. Yeah. The main thing in the minds of the fans was, I want my hero to win.
Yeah.
That was it. They weren't booking the match in their heads. They weren't looking at pacing and storylines and all of today's jargon. No. They just wanted Dominic Danucci to beat George the Animal Steele. That's all they cared about.
Well, I mean, that's not, there's something to say for that, but at the same time, if you've just watched something really incredible, like a great back and forth between just a nasty heel and a super over babyface, and then it just ends out of nowhere right when you're getting into the really good part, and then someone uses a foreign object, and that's it. Yeah, your guy might have won, but it would have been so much sweeter if you just had that conclusion. And that's where I come from, and I've always felt that way. I felt that way when I kind of started dropping off from WWF in like 97, 96, 97 and all that. And you'd notice on every main event, on almost every show, there was a DQ. And I conditioned myself to the fact that I said, well, there's almost no point in even watching the main event. I'll tune in for the last 3 minutes, but there's no point in watching it because you already know what's going to happen. It's same thing as when they do, oh, this is a non-title match, and then the person wins the match against the champion, but they can't win the belt, just old caveats like that just kind of drive me nuts.
Well, you would have hated the old days when, thanks to Brett Williams and all the really great Facebook people who put the old clips and results online for free because they love it. They're not making any money doing it. They're just doing it because they're having fun. And I want to thank them all because I like looking at those old newspaper ads and newspaper accounts. But anyway, in the arena I used to go to, I swear to you, they would have 5-match cards and 3 of them would be DQs. 3 of the results would be DQs. It was that way back then. And even that I thought was a little bit excessive. But if you look at them, preponderance of DQs, and I think the reason they did DQs in B shows or smaller towns is because that way nobody loses face. Nobody gets
Yeah.
pinned, because if you want them, you want the big stuff to happen at the Garden and the Boston Garden and in Philadelphia. You don't want to happen in Albany and Hamburg and wherever the smaller federation or the
Yeah.
smaller towns were. I really believe that did taint some of the results.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the reasons why people don't take house shows as seriously. They go if they know they want to have a good time, and the wrestlers can kind of let loose a little bit, try out some new things and all that. But they know 9 times out of 10 nothing major is going to happen here, and it's very rare when it does, and sometimes it's just a mistake. No, and it's true. I mean, I think the last time I can remember that happening was at AJ Styles won the world title because I forget who he was going against, but he forgot to kick out at 3. No, but I just remember watching that and going like, oh, he won the title, and it was at a house show, and it was a big deal. And then they kind of got out that, yeah, the guy was supposed to kick out. So, but I mean, that's very rare that it ever happens. But that's the whole point, is that you want to have, I guess, the bigger shows, obviously the pay-per-views and all that. That's going to be where the majority of that stuff happens.
Well, here's the deal too. I mean, look at it this way. I loved Memphis, but that Mid-South area had, Evansville, Indiana, and they did other cities in Tennessee and other cities in Arkansas. So, and they would do phantom title changes into small towns and then come back and flip it again.
Yeah.
But they would never mention it on the A show.
No.
So, everybody was sneaky. Everybody wanted to sell tickets, and everybody wanted to kind of do things their own way when business got bad, So, let's face it, wrestling is like, well, it's pretty much like buying a used car, really. You never know what you're going to really get.
Yeah, they even had that over in Japan when you couldn't see the Japan results a lot of the times. Oh, Fujinami won the title, and then he dropped it back a day later to Flair. Baba won the title, but he dropped it the next day to whoever was the touring champion. And, it was easier back then because you couldn't cover it as much, but,
I do think, even in my prime in the wrestling band, nothing annoyed me as much as either the Dusty finish or the AWA finish, where Stanley Blackburn has ruled it wasn't the original referee, and therefore the title does not change hands. Boo. How many times did they go back to that well? My gosh.
That's how Hogan ended up just saying, I'm out of here. This has happened too many times. The fans didn't buy it anymore. And
yeah,
that was the beginning of the end.
That was Vern Gagne's downfall. He should have made Hulk Hogan his. You imagine what the change it would have been?
That would have been
now it would have, because you know what? Vern Gagne was so old school. He was never going to change from his promoting style, unless it was too late when they were on ESPN and they made up that weird ass thing that he said at the end with the turkey on a pole and all this stuff. So, but in any event, no, it's a funny thing. It's just, I don't know why wrestling promotions stoop to that level. Just give people finishes,
I prefer that. Yes.
Yeah. Everybody's talking about John Cena, the McDonald's spokesman and Make-A-Wish guy turned vicious heel, which got me to thinking, which is a terrible thing. The great heel to face to heel turns from the past, because we're here to talk about old stodgy stuff like me. So the first thing I have to think of, what I consider probably the most valuable heel to face turn, was in 1974 when a feud with Gary Hart's Charge, and I hope I'm saying this right, I only read his name in the magazines, Pak Song, turned Dusty Rhodes face. And it changed wrestling forever, created one of the biggest stars, happened in Florida, and he just exploded. People took to him for the minute he said that was wrong, he's a bad man or something like that. He became Dusty Rhodes right then and there. Before, he used to just be a tag team guy with Dick Murdoch, and they would grunt and groan, and But then when he started to put his own personality into who he was, he became a major star. Even you know about that one, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And you see, especially as it progressed, as the years went on, closer to the end of the 70s, when even him at MSG, and just had the crowd in the palm of his hand, and he was still ascending at that point, but the crowd was completely behind him. Didn't stick around. Ended up, with Florida, Georgia, all that stuff. And it just kept elevating as he went, and it was a real sight to see. And he never lost favor. Well, let's try to forget about the time he joined the NWO and actually threw part of his babyface persona in the trash. But yeah. Yeah, he was great.
He was like Andre in the late 70s. He would go from place to place to place to place as a special attraction. At the Garden, he would wrestle Graham and great matches. Oh my gosh. Legendary cowbell match.
Yeah.
Which probably was probably the cause. Well, I can't say that. We all know what happened to Billy Graham's health after that, but
Sure.
later years. But he did have a blood disease, so. But boy, they bled like suck pigs in that match. It was just probably one of the 3 bloodiest matches in the history of the Garden. Just behind Slaughter against Pat Patterson. My God, did you ever see that Boot Cat match?
Yeah, I did once. It was a long time ago, but yeah, that was pretty brutal.
Oh yeah, it looked like I would be yelling stop the match. He looked like he was bleeding out.
Yeah,
thick cascades of blood, or as the Wrestling Magazine 1974 said, gushing flows of blood you missed until now. That's how they sold magazines back then.
Gushing flows,
blood. I mean, those Wrestling magazines, and I bought them. I bought them in that era, but they kind of tainted what wrestling really was. I don't care how bloody the magazines were. What you saw was 1 match per card, 1 match per every 2 cards. But if you flip through a Western magazine from 1973, it looked like they were just sawing each other in half all the time. Yeah. It was like really, really bloody. And, they made us stop doing that when I was with the company. A little while before I started in 88, the distributor said, we're not putting this out there anymore. We're getting too many complaints.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Interesting.
So they stopped the bloody covers.
That's kind of interesting considering there was, Fangoria and magazines like that were very popular at the time.
Yeah, but there wasn't blood on the covers, though.
Yeah, I guess you're right, yeah.
There was Vampirilla, but there wasn't blood. Yeah.
There's other stuff going on there. Yeah.
Other stuff was going on, yeah. Right. But then again, we had those scintillating Apartment House Wrestling pictorials. You know what I'm saying, fella? Mm-hmm.
I looked at those just a little bit longer when I was waiting in the grocery store for my mom, and I was just like, something's going on here. I can't quite figure it out, but okay, here we go. Yeah.
You could get away with it because it said wrestling on the cover, and your mom didn't notice. If I was allowed, Playboy, my mother would have slapped me.
Yes.
But anyway, we're off topic here. One of my favorite heel turns was 1991. You can probably guess. The Barber Shop.
Oh,
the breakup of the Rockers.
Absolutely.
Where Shawn Michaels throws Marty Jannetty through a supposed plate glass window of the barbershop owned by Brutus Beefcake. Yeah. I'll tell you what, it was effective. He was instantly hated for it. And even though the Rockers feud turned out to fizzle, heel Shawn Michaels was here to stay.
Yeah. No, that was one of the last kind of impressions I had, but kind of before I started high school, and I was just kind of not watching it for much longer. They were planting all the seeds for months, obviously. They keep like running into each other in the match, and, one thing sees a little bit better than the other and takes the wrong way. But it was different. It was kind of a different type of breakup because, you got super kick and you think, okay, yeah, I can see that. But then it's like, oh, well, how about I just throw you through a window? Kind of alarming at the time because you didn't really see stuff like that, at least on a major scale. Right. I mean, Memphis and stuff like that, a lot different. Right? But, on a major scale like that, you thought, wow, they actually kind of went a little haywire there.
And they handled it pretty tastefully because you saw Jannetty holding his head as he's laying on the ground when they fished him back in. And you could see the stream of blood down the side of his head, but it wasn't too gory, but you could tell he was cut. They did that very, very well. So that way you could probably get away with offending the sponsors of the day and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Plus, he had time to gig himself where nobody could see. So.
Well, who knows? Who
knows? Yeah.
Listen, I give them all the credit for their sleight of hand, particularly in WWE these days, because I did notice one thing on recent WWE bloody moments.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys come up with blood off camera.
Mm-hmm.
Like they come out of backstage, are already bleeding, or something happened backstage, and they'll show the guy laying there and he's cut, but you don't see him being cut.
Right.
And that leads me to believe they're using some pretty new methods, and if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Without gigging. Mm-hmm. I'm only guessing, folks. I have no way of knowing this, but I think they're being pretty safe with when they do bleed. I think they're being as safe as they could possibly be, which is a good thing. Sure. Right before you got involved here on Tonight's show, I'm flipping around and somebody sent me a link to, I guess this is around 1980, 81, Pat Patterson's babyface turn in the WWE, where he was teaming with the Samoans. They had spent 3 weeks teasing something was going on between Lou Albano and the Grand Wizard. As it turns out, the Grand Wizard needed money. He was a little cash poor. So that's what he said.
Yeah.
So he sold the contract of Intercontinental Champion Pat Patterson to Lou Albano. Well, out of nowhere, fans didn't even hear the interview, but he goes, McMahon and Sammartino are introducing the show, and here comes Patterson behind them. He goes, excuse me, Bruno, excuse me, Vince. I don't like that fat Lou Albano. I think he's a slob, but he's a bum. Nobody saw that coming. And the fans aren't hearing it because it wasn't through the PA mic or anything like that. Then they have a 6-man tag with the Samoans and Patterson against Danucci, Putski, and Larry Zbyszko. Match didn't matter. What did matter is that, Albano starts arguing with Patterson. The Samoans are doing whatever Albano tells him, and at one point they hold him, and Albano hits Patterson in the head with a chair.
Yeah.
Opens up a cut. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great because the fans immediately sided with Patterson.
Yeah.
Because, as I always say, Lou Albano at that stage was a walking fart. He was the most odious person you'd ever see in your life.
Right.
Just big bulbous gut hanging out with an open Hawaiian shirt and shorts. He was disgusting. There's no two ways about it. Yeah, a little. Yeah. No more than I am, but he was nonetheless disgusting. So anyway, they took to Patterson, and I love the fact that they later made Patterson the color commentator, so that way he could get into feuds with Sergeant Slaughter, Angelo Mosca, and Ivan Koloff the same way. He got belted during interviews.
Yeah.
But no, Patterson, I think, was very effective as a heel in WWE, and including, like we just talked about, that classic boot camp match against Slaughter from the Garden, which is, some people consider that one of the 10 greatest MSG matches ever.
Sure. Yeah, and it's weird. It's like it kind of reminded me like when Hercules had his contract sold by Bobby Heenan, and it was sold to Ted DiBiase. I think that's who it was. And Hercules is all incensed. Oh, I can't go with that guy and all that. And then he starts grabbing Heenan like this, and then next thing you know, they attack him, and he's a babyface, and then he was for most of the run after that.
But wasn't DiBiase screaming, "You're going to be my slave"?
Yeah, something along those lines.
Something like that.
I remember that.
Really, really stupid, to be honest with you.
It was the only thing I could think of, like in right the second, that kind of parallels that in a way. But it was kind of, it's like, oh, you're going to sell to this guy? Nah, there's no way, But
it worked. It worked
for sure. Yeah.
Unlike the one time that Paul Orndorff's second flip flop, and he announces his manager. Here's my manager, Oliver Humperdinck, and the crowd goes, "Who?"
Yeah.
Remember now, WWF was always its own animal. They didn't know what was going on in Florida. They didn't know the other managers from anybody. So they're bringing out Oliver Humperdinck, who had the charisma of a squirrel who'd been run over by a car. No, I'm sorry. He just another slobby looking manager, and they went, "Huh? Who? Why?"
I do actually, because I do remember when Bam Bam Bigelow first started, around WrestleMania 4, around that area. And I remember seeing him because I thought he would look really cool. This big dude with a tattooed head. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy, and I ended up being a fan of him for his whole career. But he did that. He came down with Oliver Humperdinck, and it's Sir Oliver Humperdinck. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Because I don't know anything else going on. I said, who the hell is this big fat guy walking down with this ginger hairdo? And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is interesting. No idea what he'd done in the past. I understand now, but I'm thinking, well, you're not giving me any kind of pretext here to let me know what this guy's all about. But there he was. But
they didn't really explain him all that well. Well,
no.
WWE just brought back Paul Ellering and just let him go. The entire time he was there, I heard him say one thing.
Yeah.
He used to be one of the great talkers in the business. I guess he had Karrion Kross and Scarlett and there's 2 other big guys. I don't even remember who they are at this point. Talk about, why do they bring one of the great talkers of the business and not to let him talk?
That's just it's just comedy of errors in general, because the whole thing was doomed from the start, because who was it? The Authors of Pain. That was their name.
Authors of Pain. That's right.
Yeah. And I was always very impressed with them in NXT because they were just two big guys, but they were very lumbering, got their point across. I always thought that was really good. When they came back, I was like, oh, was sorry to see them go. That's great. They're back. And then a lot of the time they're just they'll get knocked out of the ring and they're outside the ring for 5 minutes, just, huffing air because they can't get back in it.
Right.
And that was the kind of the critique. And then the other thing was you have Paul Ellering, the manager of the most famous tag team of all time. And he's just
there.
kind of you're like looking all astute and, just glaring at everybody. I'm like, well, okay, that's all well and good. And I'm glad he got a payday. That's great. But
they've been trying to get Karrion Kross's Scarlett over. I think I know how to get him over. Every time I see a shoot interview with him being interviewed by just people, he seems like the most likable, funny guy. Let him be that.
Mm-hmm.
You ever hear Jesse Ventura impersonation?
Yeah.
It's astounding.
Oh, yeah, it's incredible.
Oh, I don't want to repeat it. If guys on YouTube, just look up his Jesse Ventura impersonation. It's murderous. It's excellent.
He has all the tools. He really does.
He does.
It's just one of those things.
Here's the one thing I think he's going. He's overacts. Get rid of that. Get rid of that leer. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. It just looks. It looks comic book.
They've kind of made it a little more intriguing now because he'll just kind of. He's one of those little hangers on. He'll just come out of nowhere and just like, oh, you really shouldn't listen to that guy.
Yeah, I've seen that recently. You see that might work into something. That might lead to something.
And that I can deal with. It just seems like everything from when he came into NXT, and I think I'm pretty sure it's when there was nobody in the crowd, is the start of COVID. But you're watching the guy and like, this guy is, he's got something going. And then, he got injured. And then it's like ever since then, it just seems like there's like that one little thing you're just thinking if they could just find that one little thing, it would just make it work, and nobody can find it. But there's little glimpses.
The one little thing is forget the tarot cards, forget the mystical Scarlet, and be yourselves. Seriously. Right. First of all, everybody drools when Scarlet comes around, so that's one thing. Number two, he's a likable guy. Yeah. Let him be likable. Turn him face.
He is actually
not even turn him face. Just let him be himself.
Sure, and he's the one where everybody online praises him, saying this is like one of the most fan friendly guys you'll talk to. He replies to you on social media. He's very friendly and forthcoming, and you figure they could just take that and kind of like, well, let's move that over a little bit to TV and see how that works out. But it's just for some reason that one little thing hasn't clicked yet.
I'm something I had when I started the podcast. I said some very derogatory things about it. I take it all back. I know I'm rooting for him now. I think he's got it. You have to bring him out of him.
Yeah.
When they let Stone Cold be Stone Cold for his own little psyche came out, bingo, jackpot. Same with The Rock. Same with a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
Let him be himself. I am telling you, it could work.
And I mean, there are some people that you will see and think on paper, well, with the way the crowd is, they may not take. But Gunther is, everybody hates him. So he's doing his job great. He looks like this sneering, terrible person. And then you get someone like Braun Breaker, who's like, he's on that level where it's like some people are against him, some people love him. And he's not the greatest on promos and stuff like that, but he has everything else going for him.
Mm-hmm.
The whole pedigree, everything. And he's incredible to watch. So it's like, sometimes things don't add up and you can't figure out why. Sometimes you see a wrestler and it won't make any sense to you, and then all of a sudden it just kind of clicks. It's weird.
I still think Karrion, and you know what, they did a whole mess of releases. He wasn't one of them. I think somebody that thinks like I'm thinking. I'm telling you, he's just one. You have a wind up toy. You have to wind it up all the way. He needs that last wind. He needs that last. Just tell him to get out there and go and do what he does best. Because what, I think he's appealing, and they're not letting him be appealing. Well, why not just go with that?
I used to hear people say, oh, well, he grew his hair out, so it's because he used to have a shaved head and he was better then, so they should just shave his head. And I'm thinking, is that your answer? Because that's a little bizarre. Yeah, I even heard Cornette saying that, and I thought, come on, Jim, like, better than that. It's more than that going on. I mean, it's a little funny that they think that, well, if he just shaves his head, all is well. And it's not. You can evolve. There's many wrestlers that evolved through the years and have had different looks, different hairstyles, different dress, whatever. And it can all work out, but you just have to know that fine balance of when to change and how long to do it for.
Well, here's the problem. When they came onto the main roster, here's Karrion Kross, and he was seething when he left, and he was starting feuds with people for no reason.
Mhm.
And somehow tarot cards were mixed into it, and somehow the mystical Scarlet. Well, how the hell is she mystical? She's just standing there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like forget all that mumbo jumbo and let them be themselves.
Yeah.
Seriously, I mean, I think they have a diamond in the rough. Look, they let LA Knight be himself.
Mm,
Big business, lots of
Yeah.
merchandise sales.
for sure.
A lot of these people, once they're allowed to bloom and do what they've always done best. But like I say, I see him on social media. He seems like the coolest dude. Let him be the
Yeah.
cool dude. I mean,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know what else to say because he's got enough talent in the ring.
There are some people that just will click, and there's some I shake my head at and say, why is this person even popular? And it just doesn't work for me. But then everybody else on the rest of the planet thinks this person's great, and I'm okay.
Well,
But it just not everything's designed for you to get behind. It's different flavors of fans and what they'll go for, and sometimes something just pops up out of nowhere, magic happens. You can't really diagnose how this is supposed to work a lot of the times. It just does.
hey, listen, a couple years ago, PWI named Orange Cassidy the most popular wrestler of the year, and I was going to change. It was going to change shows. It was going to be the outdated. It's going to be the outdated millinery hour where we
Yeah.
discuss stitching and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? Listen, each to their own. I will
Yeah.
never put anybody down. If you love AEW, you go ahead and love it. I'm serious. I
Yeah.
never would put anybody down for loving that.
I may question it a little bit, if someone says, well, this is great and you should like this. And I'll say, well, I don't like it and this is why. I mean, we can have discussions like that but there's sometimes I just look at somebody and say, why?
And
There's-
but you know what? There's
you know.
also an on-off switch on your TV. It's real easy. If
Oh,
you're not
sure,
enjoying
yeah.
it, look at something else. That's all. The gradual face non-turn of Dick the Bruiser, who
Mm,
used to team with the Crusher and they would just pummel people for about a decade and a half. But I think what happened is there was a Detroit disc jockey who sounded just like Dick the Bruiser. This is a
Mm.
real story.
okay.
And Dick the Bruiser went and met this guy on the air. And soon enough, Dick the Bruiser was on the radio. Come to the, Johnson Tire Company. It's the best tires. You tell them Dick the Bruiser, that type of thing. And I think
Yeah.
people fell in love with him just gradually because he was such a big teddy bear when you got down to the bottom of it, at least in terms
Sure.
of his real personality. It's sometimes you can turn face without even trying. And I think
Y-
that's one of those cases.
Yeah, you can look at it like, well, he's a heel, but he's our heel, and the crowd
Yeah,
will just
yeah.
get behind you. You can look at it like, you can take it to sports, like the Philadelphia Flyers were the biggest goons on the ice in the 70s. But if you're in Philadelphia, they were your team, even though
That's
they broke
right.
all the rules and everything. They were still your team. So if you look at it like Dick the Bruiser, they got used to him, not in a bad way, but he'd been there for so long, and eventually it's like I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what he's going to do each week because I kind of know he's he breaks the rules, but I'm used to seeing him do that, so I'm kind of interested to see where it goes, and it just eventually sometimes it just takes over.
Yeah, well, look at Ric Flair when he had his retirement ceremony with WWE.
Mm.
We love you, and they spent most of his career booing him.
Yeah.
But only, like I say, fan conventions. I've heard this a million times. A fan wants an autograph, and he goes to the wrestler. He goes, "Boy, I hated you. Every Sunday morning on the television, I just couldn't stand you. Could I have your autograph?"
Yeah, exactly.
Only wrestling can do that.
Yeah,
Only wrestling. You hate them your whole life, but when they retire and they get older, you want to thank them for making you mad.
I-
Just
yeah,
nothing
and
like it.
it's funny too because that's kind of how and some people may just want to turn off the podcast right now when I say it, but I kind of feel the same way about Eric Bischoff. I couldn't stand the guy just in general back when he was running WCW, and when you start hearing some of the interviews, he seems like a good guy. He seems like, yeah, I wish I could have that one back. Oh, I wish I could do that differently. Oh, I really shouldn't have given that guy some power or whatever. He seems like he'll own up to a lot of the stuff that he did wrong, and he just seems like a down to earth, nice guy. You just want to go have a beer with or something, And he would be one of those guys. I would go to him in a convention and say, "Man, I thought you were a piece of crap back then, but I really appreciate you now," and just shake his hand.
there are people who play the roles so well, you don't think they're playing roles.
Yes. Yes.
Logan Paul.
Yeah.
God, he's revolting. But you know what? He makes you hate him in that old school way. The Miz did that for years. The honky tonk, people you go, God,
Yeah.
get him on. I can't look at this anymore. You're so
Yeah.
annoying. That's what they're trying to do. Now,
Yeah.
I think in terms of Bischoff, especially when the NWO came around, he was just the ultimate smarmy, power hungry,
Yeah.
CEO type. I'm behind all this, and you're gonna love it whether I tell you to. It's like he was real good at being that smarmy, ucky guy, and I think people thought that was really him.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that it blurred the lines, and that was also the time when you weren't really, and kayfabe was pretty much dead, but unless you're reading the sheets and stuff like that, or you had a little bit of an insider knowledge, you'd still kind of wonder about certain things. And Bischoff was one of those guys like, oh, I'm going to give results for Raw on the air, and so you won't watch the show and stuff like that. The Mick Foley thing, well, they'll put some butts in seats, things like that. Just really terrible crap. But at least he'll say, he'll be like, I had to try to make this work, so I had to try to do whatever I could. Yeah, it may not have been the best way to go about it, but it worked, and I was proof of that because I turned the company from a money loser into actually a profit. You may not agree with how he went about it, but you can say, he tried. He can at least look back on it and say, yeah, I may have screwed that up or whatever, but I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now if I hadn't at least tried those things.
No, I am growing very fond of him in his old age too. I think he's got interesting things to say. He seems really level-headed, which you wouldn't think.
Very,
yes.
Persona. Yes.
And I don't know. It's somebody I'd like to say, because I did meet him when I was working for WCW Magazine on a couple of occasions. He wouldn't have remembered it. It was, hi, how are you? Good. How you doing? Good. Nice meeting you. Thank you. You too.
Yeah.
One of those. You know how that works.
Yeah.
Because I was there to interview the wrestlers. It had nothing to do with, anything he was doing. But I'm with you on Bischoff. I have begrudgingly come to respect and really like him. I think his heart's in the right place. And you wouldn't have guessed that, but his heart really is always in the right place.
Yeah, it's like, is it kind of the same for it's kind of a reverse for me with Paul Heyman, as I thought he was the greatest thing in the world when I was watching ECW and all that stuff, and then once you hear more stuff about him through the years, and you're just, oh my God, what a snake, but I can always respect what he's done, but the way he's gone about it sometimes, and the trail of blood he left behind, I don't know sometimes,
Yeah. I'm reserving judgment on him. Because there was a time when I was in ECW and I showed up kind of unsurprised. Todd Gordon knew I was coming. This is when Joey Styles, and I worked with Joey Styles.
Mm-hmm.
And Joey goes, oh, this is great. You got to come and do some commentary with me. I said, what? He said, yeah, come on in the booth. You were in the booth before. Well, let's do it together. So we did it. We did a couple of matches, which ended up on a DVD somewhere. You can hear
them.
Yeah. But Heyman, I go backstage. Heyman goes, I want you off the mic.
Wow.
That's all he said. He didn't say, hey, Bob. He knew who I was. He just, I want you off the mic.
Wow.
I said, yeah, all right. Okay. I didn't ask to get on the mic. I was invited by the people and the director to go and sit down, and because everybody knew me backstage because I worked there early.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe he had something to do with, but on that same show, Public Enemy beat the crap out of Joey Styles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know what was going on there. Something was up, but
I was pissed off that day or something.
I talked to Todd about that. Todd, I said, "Why did they do that?" He goes, "Because they liked him." That's the wrestler's way of showing your respect.
In the weirdest way possible.
In the weirdest way, that's actually probably true.
Yeah, and in any other facet of life, that would be like, what? Why do you hate me so much? Instead, you have someone like slap you upside the back of the head. Hey, you're all right. Oh, thanks.
No, but you know what? Joey didn't know it was coming, and he was really mad, and I could tell he was legit mad. Mm-hmm. But they calmed him down backstage for whatever reason. And I don't know how much of it ended up on tape. Yeah. I just know that it was a legit kind of a beatdown, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
they flipped him over. Oh my God! And I remember screaming to the mic, Joey Styles is getting napalm. They're getting the hell out of here. And I did. I hauled ass.
Yeah.
And then he got up and he looked like he wanted to fight back.
Yeah.
Joey was in good shape. Joey was in really good shape.
I've heard, yeah.
and nothing ever became of it. But I sat next to him when that happened, so I don't know what to say. That was ECW for you. Anything could go there.
Anything goes, yeah.
I just got one more I want to bring up. Andre challenging Hulk on Adrian Adonis's flower shop was probably better than the match.
I want to challenge you for the World Heavyweight Championship.
That's right, yeah.
Sort of understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And he ripped his cross off or bloodied his chest and ripped his T-shirt. And Andre, how could you, just, it was good stuff. Good stuff. I remember, you know who I was watching? Jesse. Jesse was on the left side of the screen. You just see him turn and go, whoa, right?
Yeah.
He just looks, whoa.
Yeah, he wasn't totally ready for it.
Almost like he didn't see it coming. Jesse made that because Jesse sold it.
Yeah.
In that subtle,
I'm standing in the background. I can't even see this coming, Yeah.
Yeah, and he was just like, whoa. So I'm like, that was great, Jesse. You're the man. Yeah. I did speak with him on a couple of different, including a long interview I did with him with Peter. Jesse Ventura is my man. I don't care.
Oh,
I know he's sort of a conspiracy theorist in some people's eyes. I love the guy. I love the fact that he's opinionated. I think he's got a heart of gold, and I rooted for him to become mayor and governor, all that other stuff. I am a huge Jesse the Body Ventura fan. I think he's great. I just do. I've always liked the guy a lot.
Oh, me too. He's one of those people where, the wrestling left, let's say, a little to be desired. But, when he...
You know what? I take
to me.
He was at the end of the punch and kick era.
Yeah.
You you could look good and just punch and kick and have two moves, and you could get a career out of that. You could.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like I said, my favorite wrestler of the time was Baron Mikel Cicluna, who kicked and punched 80% of the time. That's all he did. Sure. But he still got over because he was bigger than everybody else for a little while. So it's just it was, it was an era where if you did dirty things, people hated you and you sold tickets.
Sure. Yeah.
And now, and he, how Jesse was. He was the body beautiful and boo, he's so full of himself. It's just, it worked.
Yeah, and when he stepped away from wrestling, and then you start to really understand the man and see the interviews and all that, and you just think, this guy actually has something going on. He's very smart. They didn't make him out like he was maybe like had a huge IQ in WWF, but he makes some really good commentary, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm superior to everybody with intellect. But when you really get down to it with his career and his political career and everything, it's just crazy. He's one of those guys where you wouldn't expect that he was as level-headed and informed as he was outside of the wrestling business. I remember even my dad saying that. My dad said, Jesse Ventura, he's pretty damn smart. I said, yeah, I know, Dad. And he said, no, really, I never knew about it because I just always knew him as a wrestler. And then listen to him now. Now he's a governor? What? That kind of thing. But
Jesse on WWE TV back in the late 70s, early 80s got away with something I think only he knew. He used to come on wearing a Plato's Retreat T-shirt. Plato's Retreat was a famed swingers club in Manhattan, New York City, where anything went, if you know what I mean, kids. And I'll tell you what, he got away with it because I don't think people knew what that meant.
No, they just thought it was a nice island somewhere where you can just get away with the family.
I was watching a bowling show from Buffalo on YouTube once. I watch bowling. I know I'm a boring old man. I'm watching bowling, and this guy's got a shirt on that says Brazzers. I'm like, how did they let him on TV? right on the pocket of the front of his bowling shirt, it said Brad. I said, you couldn't. You know why? Because nobody there knew what it meant. So don't say anything else. Don't say anything else, please. But I wanted you to get a laugh out of that because I couldn't believe it. My eyes were bugging out like Volkswagens. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's why local TV rules and always will, because you never know what you're going to see.
Absolutely. Wow.
I was going to say, have you been watching any new stuff, AEW, WWE, any impressions on how the business is going? Anything you want to talk about wrestling-wise?
As far as AEW, God, no. I can't. It's
you've defended them, but you've been very human about it.
I am human.
You do make a good point. Liam's point has ostensibly been for a long time, a couple of years now, is that it's wrestling needs an alternative. Tony Khan has created jobs in the wrestling industry, and it's not going to go away anytime soon, no matter how the attendance goes.
God, no.
So it's a good thing in that regard. With that, I totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
However, they have put on some of the most god awful. I will say this, Will Ospreay, a lot of people love, and MJF goes without saying. He's
sure,
but it seems like they get this talent. 6 months rolls by, and they're just part of the scenery. Or at least it feels that way. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, that's something that's happened for the longest time. And it was a little bit of a punchline at first, and then everybody kind of just started expecting things to start going that way with almost everybody. Can't say with everybody, but almost everybody. I think the Hurt Syndicate now, I think they're called. I think they're probably one of the few people that came in that are actually sort of in the forefront. But other than that, it's usually the whole thing of, okay, you're good for a little bit, maybe get a couple months out of you, and then, okay, well, we'll just keep sending you checks and you can just go home and work out, I guess. But I'm not a fan of AEW at all. I've realized that even if I try to sit through something and try to get hope for something, it's never going to work out the way I want it to. So I just don't watch, and people can criticize me for that. But why would I waste my time on something that I'm pretty sure is not going to leave me feeling all, great? It's just going to get me down every time I watch it.
That whole sending people home thing is nothing new. When I was with WCW magazine, I'm not going to mention any names because I have too much respect for my friends. But I knew guys that were making boku bucks, sitting on their asses back in their hometowns.
Yeah,
and lots of them.
Yeah,
because they would sign these people either away from the WWF or they bring people in from Mexico or Puerto Rico or place, and they didn't know what to do with them once they got them.
Yeah.
I think the worst example of that was Bret Hart, but there's just my 2 cents. Because I think
sure.
Bret Hart was totally mishandled in WCW. Nobody remembers a damn thing he did there. Do you?
The only thing I remember is him wearing the steel plate on his chest when Goldberg came at him to give him the spear, and then it knocked him out, and notobody could figure out why he was knocked out. And then he pulls up his hockey jersey, and he's got a big metal plate right there, and he's like, I just knocked him out. And I was like, oh, that was all right. But
I don't
other than that,
now that you mention it, I do remember it, but I forgot it. That was like Chinese for me. I watched it, and then I totally forgot it an hour later.
Yeah, he was in the NWO. Do you remember that? No.
Everybody was in the NWO.
Right, but he was one of the bigger stars of the 90s, and he was in the NWO, and nobody really remembers that. And
no.
And he was I think he won the world title a couple of times. Nobody really remembers.
Look at the history of TNA. The massive amount of stars who have gone through there.
Yeah.
The Steiners and Hogan and Bischoff and Booker T and Sting and on and on and on and Kurt Angle and this one, and nobody mentions it.
That's the funny thing is Kurt Angle.
Isn't that amazing? It's amazing.
Look at it like Kurt Angle. He had some of his best matches in TNA. And he was there a lot longer than WWE. A lot longer. And nobody ever seems to bring that up. It's crazy, and people don't even think of AJ Styles anymore with TNA. It was weird at first when he went to WWE, but then after a while, it's just like second nature when you see him.
Oh, yeah, that was AJ with the short hair.
Yeah. But you kind of, it's weird how history kind of changes like that as you see things, and some people just pay attention and some don't. And
years and years ago, I had Queens. I live in Queens, New York, and I had cable TV from back then. I think it was Time Warner, and for some reason they stuck this fringe Atlanta station into our program package. I don't remember even what it was called. They had 2 things I used to watch. One was this. One came on in the morning. And it was so bad I used to tape it. I used to DVR it or whatever. No, I would tape it on the VCR. It was a local clown show, but the guy had like sweatpants on.
Oh no.
And it was so wonderfully bad that I watched every episode. All the little kids would play games, and I forget the name of the clown, but I loved it with a passion. I wish I had saved those tapes. Secondly, they had NWA Wildside on. I think it was a Bill Barron's promotion.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
That was where AJ cut his teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing him back there, and they did push him as the biggest thing in sliced bread.
Yeah,
and I could see why they did it. The problem is the matches were really unfocused in that federation. It wasn't.
Oh, sure.
It wasn't really cohesive, but he did a lot of his spots there, and it's true. He could wing himself around the ring like nobody else could. Mm-hmm. They also had a protege of Abdul the Butcher called Iceberg Slim, who was just. No, I swear to God, He looked like a big rubber ball, and he used to just jab people in the head with what appeared to be. You remember Chef of the Future with the honeymooners, that big gadget?
Yeah.
Well, he would just ram that into people's heads, and they would say censored on the screen. He would bloody up people with this big foreign object. He was like Abdul the Butcher on, vanilla Abdullah, I guess is what
I can't get over the name Iceberg Slim.
Iceberg is a great name though, right?
That's gonna be stuck in my head now. I'm gonna be using that as a code name for people.
Go on YouTube.
Oh wow.
Go on YouTube and look up Iceberg Slim matches. I believe he was voted into the Indie Wildside Hall of Fame or something like that.
With a name
Whatever
like that, you have to.
I don't know.
Man, that's
but
incredible.
I used to watch it because it was this weird little, it was taped in Georgia. There's about 30 people looking at it in you know what it looked like? You ever spill M&Ms? And you saw like a face here, then you see nothing and a face there.
Yeah.
That's what the crowd looked like, right? It looked like you spilled M&Ms on your couch is what it looked like.
Yeah.
But I watched the thing religiously as long as that. And then as mysteriously as it came on our cable system, it left.
Yeah.
So whoever in Queens decided to put Georgia Fringe TV on I have no earthly idea. But I got to see AJ Styles when he was just starting out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I actually wrote a letter to the Observer that got printed.
Oh, really?
Because I knew Dave, and I had some things to complain about, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
But, Dave's always been good to me over the years, so how can I?
Sure.
So, and you've been good to me, too. This is like, what, your 17th, 18th appearance here? 19th?
I don't know. I'm like...
If this was SNL, you'd have the jacket,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But unfortunately, the only jacket I have... You like this jacket? I'll send it to you. I'm wearing a sport coat now, so I have to send
everybody, it's a great sport coat. It looks... It's beautiful, and I want to have it.
It's members only, so it's quality.
I see the crest and everything. You can see it right now, guys.
No, this is a back of my closet. It's cold out thing I wear as a sweatshirt. This is basically why I have this on. It's been cold here in New York and windy.
Yeah, but plus you look stylish when you do it, so I mean it works.
Yeah, I'm looking stylish in a venue where nobody can see me, except
for me. And we're not putting this out on video, so it's like this is just how stylish he is, guys.
You know what? Let's let the public decide. Would I have the means now to present the Outdated Wrestling Hour as a video presentation? The question is, would anybody want to see that? My thought would be no way.
Well, you know what? I do know some people that they say, how do you listen to podcasts? I like it when you can actually see the people and they're having a conversation. I said, yeah, I can see that, but I'm always on the go, so it doesn't always work for me. But there are a lot of people that could actually take to that, and you'd be surprised at the number of people that would probably tell you this.
That they'd rather see it than listen to it?
No, I mean both. They like listening on the podcast platforms, but if they have that chance and they're on YouTube and they can see the expressions that everybody's got and see the people talking and get an idea of who they are, they could be up for that, You know
what? I've been on a couple of podcasts, and I'm not going to mention who they are.
Okay.
But I didn't know that they were video podcasts. I know that, once you get used to Zoom meetings or Skype, you figure everybody sees each other.
Yeah.
But the podcasters didn't even tell me that they were putting them out in videos.
Oh.
So I'm probably doing this. I'm probably scratching my head and looking at the ground and, staring at my fingers. Oh, I got a cut.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it until it was too late. And then they say, you can look at it on YouTube. I said, YouTube. I had no idea that they were recording it for us at all. So,
well, it's a thing these days. That's what people do. We used to do with my old show I was on, and you could see all my calamities and me raging at the screen and stuff like that. For everybody to see worldwide, it was great. I mean, barely anybody watched it, but that's another story altogether. So,
listen, I throw the thing on YouTube. I do the same thing Cornette does, only I don't pay for a hilarious cartoon on it. It's just, it's my face staring at you the entire hour 10, Yeah. It's our placard, our podcast cover. And that's all I'm going to do with it. I'm just doing it because I know there are some, and I am one of them who discovered wrestling podcasts through YouTube.
Sure.
A lot of people listen to podcasts on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because, you can stick it on your phone and just listen to it if you want to. It's doable. In fact, the YouTube Music app now has an audio-video component to it.
Mm.
You can watch videos, or you can listen to just the audio version of it.
Right.
So YouTube's made a lot of people a lot of money.
Yeah.
I know people who made a living on YouTube. I know one
Oh,
guy
I
who
do too.
reviews products, and that's his living. He does it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
people who make a living on YouTube?
It's not as much on YouTube. I do know a couple people that have, but Twitch. I remember an old high school friend of mine. He would just play video games on there, which I don't get it, but whatever. To each their own. And he said, "Oh yeah, I stopped doing YouTube a while ago." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Well, I'm actually making money on Twitch." So, well, how much do you make a month? He's like, "About $4,000." And I said, "What?" I
What?
said, he said, "Yeah, I'm not even working full time anymore. I'm just doing this." I said, "You got to be kidding me." And he said, "No." He says, "I don't know if it'll maintain, but I can do this for a year and I'm good."
I didn't really understand it, but I made the mistake of starting an OnlyFans, right? And here's the problem. I didn't understand what I was doing,
Oh
and
my
now I got a whole garage full of 20-inch box fans, and I can't sell them. So I don't.
God.
It just didn't work for me. I don't understand. I mean, summer's
Ah,
coming, right? Somebody must
you went-
need these things.
you
Folks,
said you said
I got a deal on some beautiful, brand new, still in their boxes, 20-inch window fans. Just
yeah, you went
look me
one
up
way
and
and then
say,
you went one way and then you went somewhere else and I just said, okay. I was a little concerned for a second, but I
but
feel better now.
no
Yes.
need to be concerned. It's just
No, no, of
my
course not.
whack sense of humor, my friend.
Yeah.
And thanks for inviting me, but thanks for coming on the show again. It's always a pleasure. We always have fun. What's coming up for you? There are times when you've teased coming back into the podcast landscape, and other
Yeah.
times you go, eh. So what's your
Uh,
vibe right now?
no tease. I'm kind of
Busy?
yeah. It's not just busy. It's just the fact that I think I mentioned this maybe a little while ago. Was that when I was on Firm Raw Material, I wasn't running the show. I was running some of the stuff behind the scenes, but I wasn't running the show.
Mhm.
So just for the host to set everything up and get it all ready, and I'll come in, be a talking head, great, stuff like that. That's cool for me. Now, as far as running everything myself, I don't know if I'm as into the product currently as I should be to allow myself to say, okay, I'm going to do this and make a commitment for God knows how many hours every day or whatever to
Mhm.
do that.
Yeah.
I'm more of the type where if I can have a team there and I'm as a talking head, great. As I've started to think about it, I'm not going to go full bore into something that I don't know if I'll totally be up for because I want to make it work. You don't want to be one of those people. It's like, oh yeah, this is going to be great. And then 6 months later, they're gone because it happens all the time.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And podcasting is very transient. People go on and spend a couple $1,000s on equipment, and they assemble a team, and in 6 episodes they're off. They decide they can't do it, or it's too much time, or they don't get enough downloads, and they go, "What am I doing wrong?"
Yeah.
It's a tough thing. You see, I got lucky because not only was I previously on a podcast that a lot of people listen to, but I also had kind of authority voice from the old days. People
Yeah.
knew who I was.
Mhm.
Not everybody has that advantage going into doing podcasting.
Sure.
And you could know, let's say you want to do a thing on growing tulips podcast. You could be the best expert in the world, but it's hard to take that first step to get even 10 listeners.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the podcast world is very, very hard in that regard. And everybody says, start your own podcast. You'll do this.
Well,
75% of the time you won't. And I think part of the problem with the podcast world is you have a lot of fly-by-night companies saying, do this, do that, but we'll charge you to help you. And when
yeah.
you really don't need their help. Secondly, if you want to do it, you do it right. I insist, if you want to do this and do it right, you got to put the time in. I put in so much time. This
Sure.
is like having a second job. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Because it's like this show when you hear this show edited and finally out in a couple of weeks, I will have spent about 6 hours on it.
Yeah.
Total.
And
I'm serious about this stuff. So,
yeah,
I feel I owe it to the listeners to make it as good as I can.
for sure. And I mean, I can put it in this sense. I mean, I used to interview bands and review albums and stuff like that. Did it for a number of years. And as I guess, a journalist, I could bring that knowledge, say, to my own podcast, a music podcast. Doesn't necessarily mean everybody wants to hear that. And what are the chances someone's even going to remember my writing? That's how I look at it. I could do it in that sense. And I've had aspirations of that probably more than a wrestling podcast. I already have a thought in my head, but I don't necessarily know if it would work. If you're not 100% committed to it, I would say it's probably not the best idea. It doesn't mean don't take chances,
Right.
but just make sure you can invest yourself fully into this because I work and I my daughter's 16. She's not like a little kid anymore, but I still like spending time with her. I don't want to give that up for, doing a podcast all the time necessarily. If it worked, that'd be fine. But I just don't know if 100% of me is there.
I hear you. But
Yeah.
I will say one thing about podcasting is the fact that I have discovered other podcasts through this and not just wrestling. And podcasting has changed and helped me because I am not a big TV fan. I'd rather listen to two people have an interesting conversation than watch, a rerun of Gilligan's Island for the 18th time or whatever's on.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big primetime guy. I don't watch episodic TV at all. Nothing.
Sure.
No Law and Order for me. I don't know. I stopped watching episodic TV in high school and I never went back.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I've watched a couple of things in the interim. I think I got hooked on The Sopranos for a while because it was almost cinematic.
You have that. Yeah, you have to. Sure.
But other than that, I don't watch. And I have a really good TV, and I only look at sports and wrestling on it. That's all I look at.
Well, there's enough of that, both of those to cover you on the TV. So yeah, you're set.
All the best to all my friends and everyone up there in the great, great singular country of Canada. I love Canada. I spent a lot of time in Toronto when I was in college. I went to Brockport, SUNY Brockport, which is about a 6-hour out. We used to go to the music clubs like the El Macambo and stuff like that. And I love Canada. I love their musicians. I love the food. I love the people. And I have a friend named Liam Savage up there. And I'm very proud to have you on the show once again.
I appreciate you having me on all the time. And we always find a way to talk about a lot of crazy stuff. And it's great every time I'm on. Love it.
Yeah, it's totally free form. It's that's what I like. That's what I like in other people's podcasts too. Like Mark Maron. He'll have a guest, but he'll have a note with 2 things on it.
Yep.
Now I'm showing you my notes. You see this? That's the extent of my. I'm holding up a piece of paper with 5 words on it. You see that?
Yeah.
So that's the way we do it here at the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Nothing complicated, fans. Nothing. Thanks again, Liam.
Thank you.
Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. Well, that about puts a nice bow on another one for you here at the Outdated Wrestling Hour. I want to thank Joe Puccio. I want to thank Liam Savage once again for gracing us with their presences. Write to us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith that's singing with BB King. Just look up Bob Smith, and you'll see the pictures there. Our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. Listen to all of our shows free of charge. And you can also join our Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club. Learn all about it on the website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. Help us out. I am also Outdated Bob on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads. We got to get it going. We got a lot of good stuff coming up in the coming weeks. I'm working feverishly, interview after interview. And I got to get to another one right now. I'm serious. So until next time, my name is Bob Smith. This is the Outdated Wrestling Hour. If you enjoy it, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and tell your friends to take a listen. We would really appreciate it. Until next time, in the words of Ringo Starr, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.